And the next panel discussion is titled "The Role of the Financial Services IT Leader in Driving Innovation in Tough Economic Times." And the speakers are Fundile Ntuli, CIO of Ubank, Chandima Miyanadeniya, CIO AON, I think I got that right. Okay. AON SA. Tony de Sousa again from Telkom. Lourandi Kriel, Head of Finance at Fintech SA. And Valter Adao. And Mr. Adao will be moderating this panel. If you could please take your seats. Thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause.
So firstly to my guest speakers, welcome to the panel discussion. We've got quite a range of experience around the table, or around our circle here. Perhaps just to break the ice, I'm going to introduce myself to the audience and to the group, and then I'm going to ask you to do exactly the same, and perhaps provide a view on the topic. So my name is Valter Adao. I look after digital and innovation at Deloitte Digital. And so the topics of today resonate very closely with me. And over the last couple of days, I've had the opportunity of traveling around the country, meeting with the CXOs of some of our largest corporates around the country. And there's three dynamics that are challenging them. The first is this economy that is completely miscalibrated. And the principles of economics aren't necessarily behaving the way they should. Corporate trust is being challenged, or corporate trust is dropping worldwide at the moment. And if you own a Volkswagen, you probably can relate to that. And then there's this third dimension that's bringing a lot of uncertainty into the world of these executives. And that is this third dimension of digital and digital innovation, which is bringing interesting challenges to the environment. We're going to be spending a bit of time, the next 40-odd minutes, speaking about the role of the IT leader in the context of driving this innovation inside organizations. So as you introduce yourself, perhaps give us a minute or two's view on what you believe the role of the IT leader should be in terms of innovation. Tony, perhaps as one of the sponsors, I'd like you to maybe
sure.
start.
So once again, my name is Tony de Sousa. I look after the solutions business at Telkom. Although I held my ground well with my colleagues who understand the telecommunications business better than I do, I've spent over 20 years in the IT space. And in interactions with customers, a couple of things to your point. Firstly, I think organizations, especially at the C level, are actually struggling with how to defend the current revenue stream while at the same time establishing a new one. Okay? So for example, we're going through this ourselves at Telkom. So we have the fixed voice revenue stream, which is significant. And the question is, do we self-cannibalize that revenue stream in order to establish a new one, like with voice over IP and other technologies? Or do we let our competitors cannibalize that? And I think most organizations have that as a challenge. Second one is, from a CIO perspective, it is incredibly difficult to be mandated to keep the lights on while enabling business to actually enter this new digital space. And then the third one is culture. And again, at Telkom, we're going through that now, where there's a cultural change required in the way we did business versus the way we ought to be doing business moving forward. So in summary, those are the three things that I see a lot of.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing. First, introduce yourself and give us a view.
Good morning, Valter. My name is Fundile Ntuli. I'm the CIO of Ubank. For me, this is an interesting topic. I think the answers have already been provided by us, if I recall, Toli's area presentation and some of the aspects that Lillian and Tare touched on provide the answers. But what stood out for me is to say the CIO's role. I would like to think the same, it's challenges facing any business organization or any business executive, because for me, the CIO plays within this role, the space of a business. You know, he's just one of the many executives. There might be some unique aspects. I mean, having said that, so if I may talk that specifically, I don't think things have changed much over time. You know, if you look at the context of, you know, what the business's mandate is, and then subsequently what the CIO's mandate is. And if we get very specific about some of these issues, the one big issue is particularly in challenging economic times. It's about how the CIO recalibrates running the IT organization in terms of how, you know, discretionary spend is managed versus non-discretionary IT spend. You know, that's what tilts the balance towards the CIO playing an enabling role. And in my opinion, that is primarily the vehicle that can be used to drive innovation.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Yeah, speaking from an AON perspective, AON is a global company in over 120 countries. In sub-Saharan Africa, we're in 13 countries. We are by far the largest risk services broker in the continent. And bearing in mind that we deal with human resource consulting, reinsurance broking, and short-term insurance and risk management. Obviously, we're in the transaction game. And for us, when we look at managing budgets, obviously there's huge pressure to keep your budgets flat. But there's this huge drive to actually innovate as well. So how do you do that with the fact that you cannot actually increase your overhead costs, because it leads to cost of production going up? So what we've done is we've looked at back office systems and infrastructure and tried as much as possible to kind of converge, constrict, and save on costs therein, and then pump that into applications and processes for the future. And just last year, we had a global CIO. He came from an NCR background, and one fundamental thing he said was, when we look at our application pool and the legacy, we need to categorize it into museum pieces that belong to the museum and everything that's cloud ready. And then the investments need to go into the cloud ready environments, because those are the things that will springboard us into the future. So from an insurance perspective, we recognize that we need to reduce our transaction costs to make it more viable for personal lines and people who don't have too much money. So there are certain markets that we've not ventured into strategically because the transaction costs are quite high. But eventually, what we see technology doing is driving costs down to the extent that we can actually go into the middle and lower income brackets, because you've reduced transaction costs.
Yes. I'm Lourandi. Kriel, I'm the head of finance, CFO of Fintech, and we're busy merging with Bank, so soon to be Sasfin. We're in the process of integration. To come back to your question on the role of the IT leader within a business, I think there's a few roles. It's not. I think the role has evolved over time of being the leader that looks after people's laptops, systems to be working, to be an innovator themselves, look at the future, plan, get the right technology in place to enable the business. I think all back office staff should enable the business. If you're not enabling the business to sell more, do better with what you have, I don't think there's a role for you there. Then I guess I'm the bearer of bad news when it comes to budgets. So, I ultimately have to make the decision. And I find that it's easier to make a decision around IT spend when a CIO solves a problem for the business, now and in the future. And they're able to communicate that very well with good research and due diligence. I often think CIOs look at what has been done before. And, in the past there's been big, if you take things like ERP systems, there's big ERP names, but there's so many new startups that can do the same with a fraction of the cost. So strategically look at the new ones as well as the old ones and come with a solution that's obviously cost effective and will solve a problem.
Fantastic. Fundile, I want to come back to you. Are large organizations in the financial services sector facing an innovation crisis? Have we been spending way too much time focused on incremental innovation, slight improvements on reducing costs, keeping the budgets down, slight improvements on processes, etc.? And now you've got a lot of fintech startup companies that are leveraging innovative technologies to compete without tenure in the industry, without the big balance sheets and without infrastructure. Are the financial services big guns facing an innovation crisis?
But I wouldn't say so. I know that's probably a contradiction to the previous conversation. There was a lot of sentiment around whether financial services organizations are innovative or not, and I think there was a strong inclination to say they are not. But I have a different view, not necessarily because I work for a bank, but if you look at some of the, practical applications of technology that are considered innovative, a lot of them there's been involvement of financial services organizations, even big ones for that matter. Let me give you a practical example of the Sousa payouts. That's still recognized as one of the most efficient processes. We've got a private entity which has been running with that, and there's been a lot of noise around it, not about the delivery, but because there's been attempts to get the tender reissued, etc., etc. But I think it's easy to forget that this was primarily a solution developed by the banks from the onset. I might be slightly wrong in terms of the year, but this goes back to about 97, 96, or 98 at the latest. And this was driven by biometrics from the onset, and it's almost paperless. There is an element of paper. You still don't have that ubiquitous solution, that you can compare to that outside of the financial services industry. There's other small examples of that. Look at, the pilots that you've seen with, cashless cards with NFC technology. But what we probably we tend to forget, or what the public doesn't see, is the uniqueness of the challenges facing the financial services organizations. But maybe not just financial services, all large organizations face the same challenges in terms of agility, and maybe beyond agility. You start talking about adaptability. I think that's the new word that's coming up more and more, especially if you look at the modern economy. The rate of change it's unbelievable fast. Even fintechs actually struggle with the rate of change. But maybe the key issue is to say how to the large organizations, in terms of their business models, how do they accommodate that rapid change? For me, that's really the big challenge. There was reference, I don't remember, I think it's Dare who spoke about collaboration, and Tony, I think, later. That's really where the key for me lies, to say how quickly are we going to moving forward? How do we want to deliver products and services to our customers? Because if any large organization continues to see itself providing all aspects of a value chain in terms of delivery of a product and service, then I'm afraid it's going to be left behind.
So Tony, I want to come to you on that, right? In your role, you're seeing a lot of these technologies that are changing, they're dematerializing business models, they're changing the way in which organizations are competing. Do you believe that IT leaders inside banks and insurance companies are on top of what's coming at them and reacting quick enough?
Simple answer is no. Okay. And I wouldn't like to be a CIO. in one of those organizations. I think it's an exceptionally tough job. Our CEO, Len de Villiers, who a lot of the CIOs in this room will know of him or know him personally, he actually says two things. You're either a contributor at the boardroom table, or you get dictated to, okay? And as a CIO, innovation and doing things better and doing things differently has to be part of your DNA, okay? And you need to contribute to the business, make a difference, come up with ideas, etc. And one of the areas that I think a lot of companies are struggling with today is where we were about 5 or 6 years ago with mobility. So most organizations, significant organizations, were struggling with coming up with a sound mobility strategy. And I think where we are with digitalization, it's the same. There's a lot of organizations are struggling to put in place a good digital strategy. And the digital strategy is not reference to digitalization on page 37 of your strategy. It's actually digital top to bottom, left to right. It affects every aspect of your business. The supply chain, and by the way, this digital, as you pointed out, it's not just the banks. We see paranoia in the retail space as well. And the one thing that we see in common is the customer, okay? And it's also about how organizations do planning. So what typically organizations do is they know their customers today, they know their competitors today, they know the product that we're selling today, and they know the business model. The challenge is, what products are you going to be selling in 3 years' time? What is going to be your business model in 3 years' time? Who are going to be your customers? And who are going to be your competitors? So it's not sufficient for us to do an analysis or gather intelligence about our competitors and how we're going to outsmart them, because there's this new player on the market, which is the competitor that appears out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
So we at Telkom, we have, and it's led by Dr. Brian Armstrong, we have this notion of 3 horizons. Horizon 1, you know who your customers are, your products, your competitors, and your business model. Horizon 2, 2-3 years out there, it's a little bit fuzzy, but you sort of got an idea: products, customers, competitors, business model. And Horizon 3, which is like 5 years out there, it's very, very fuzzy. And we as a telco, we have to think about this. And I don't know if you're aware, but SpaceX and Google, they're doing this partnership where they're going to launch 4,000 low-flying satellites. And when they do this, 2018, 2019, they become an instant telco.
That's right.
And then what happens to Telkom and the other telecommunications? So we have this on our horizon too. It's what we do over the next 2 to 3 years that's going to determine whether we're going to be relevant in the future or not.
Fantastic. So Chandima, I want to come to you, right? We've heard now that the CIO, you mentioned that the CIO's first, that the CIO, the CTO is focused on cost. I mentioned the incremental improvements. Lourandi speaks about the need for the technology leader to be more proactive and coming with solutions to the table. And then Tony makes the point that says, you're either at the boardroom table or you're not. How do you get that level of proactivity that we need from the technology leaders inside organizations to play a bigger role in ensuring that these new technologies, these exponential technologies, digital technologies, whatever you want to call it, is core to the business strategy and the planning that's happening at the C-suite level?
Okay. Some of the interesting things for a public company listed in the UK is the Gartner-Forrester ratios in terms of IT cost to revenue, total revenue. It's bordering around 4.5% to 5% at the moment, globally, as the ratio. If you spend more, you're seen as suboptimal, and then your share price gets affected. So we kind of have to understand and appreciate that to run your business and keep the lights on, there's a certain cost. And to create innovation, you also need cash. So the reality for us is to analyze across the globe to see certain things that we can dissolve as quickly as possible, and shrink your technology platform so that your run costs are dropped, and then use that to create new technologies. And it's a bimodal approach we're looking at in doing that in various geographies. And in doing that, we have to be cognizant of the fact that whatever we build into the future has to be ready across multiple geographies. It doesn't have to be specific to a geography, so cloud makes sense there. And in South Africa, we launched a hybrid cloud. We connected into Azure, and so that our private environment and our public environment is kind of connected through express route going to Azure, so that the reality for us is to be able to create an environment in infrastructure that's flexible enough for take on, right? Once you've done that, then you've got to look at what markets you need to penetrate to and what their affordability is. Obviously, as we speak, we haven't partnered with any telcos to sell on, but what I've seen with the presentations done in Tanzania and what's happening in Kenya and some other geographies is that if you don't create good partnerships, your cost of production to the end user increases because you're actually passing money from one to another. The entity that's able to create a partnership like what Apple did when they created the Apple phone, iOS, they had Intunes. They brought in a lot of things and it became a winner. In the space of insurance, because it's really a paper trail and a contract with a specific wording, it's seen as a grudge purchase, but everybody needs it. And if you get that right through a channel distribution, through a network provider, with a product at the right cost, you can penetrate markets that you have not been able to penetrate. Now, the appetite to do that is essentially borders on, first of all, dropping your transaction costs and your base. Because if you try to do that while your transaction costs are very high, you'll make financial losses and your ratios will go offline. So we got to kind of be sure that as we penetrate into certain markets, which is large, pretty big markets that we haven't penetrated into, that we are able to, first of all, understand that as the load goes up, your transaction cost is going to go down rather than grow incrementally with it. Yeah.
So I want to perhaps challenge you on that. Do we think about the problem that way because of the paradigm that we are in as technology leaders or as financial services companies? You know, because if you look at the new entrepreneurs and the disruptors that are coming into the market,
they've got nothing.
They've got nothing.
Yes.
You know, the concept of technology costs is not even on their radar screen because it's so cheap.
Yes.
Are we stuck in a world where we are trying to make the legacy infrastructure work and therefore we don't have the boldness to dematerialize the business and create something that cannibalizes the existing business?
I can answer this in this way, because when you have legacy, and every insurer, every bank has quite a lot of legacy, and the legacy is inflexible. But that runs the core, the back engines. It's difficult to change, highly inflexible. So what we try to do is understand what the core is, and then start creating interfaces, what people call APIs. We create an integration layer to a flexible external environment that you can modify, manipulate quicker and faster at a lower transaction cost. The reality is this legacy has to also drop one day. But everybody who's tried to migrate legacy over the last 10 years, it's been at a high cost. And obviously, you got to be careful about doing this. From my reflection as a person not talking as Aon, I would rather not migrate legacy, start anew, and cut this legacy, because after 10 years, you don't need it. If your transition plan takes 10 years, leave it as it is. Just maintain it and start anew, and which is something good for an upstart because they don't have to worry about legacy. The challenge with all financial institutions, they all have a legacy environment that costs a little bit of money, and they need to sustain it for phase compliance, document retention, tax law, and everything else.
We've got a question out here.
Yeah, I have a comment regarding CIOs and their roles, and in connection with the conversation. Where I'm coming from Ghana, and we work in the IT space, so we need to always deal with the CIOs. What I find is that a lot of the CIOs are themselves legacy because they. Sounds great.
Good comment.
From the old school. They are coming from the old school. They don't know how to deal with things like APIs. They don't really understand system integrations. They know the waterfall model, get all the requirements. They are good at doing RFPs. You know, they position themselves as gods. They take on too much. They don't allow business units to figure out what they really need. They go there and then they try to suggest or propose solutions to business, and then it turns out a lot of times they fail. You see a lot of banks, especially, the go-to guy when it comes to IT or when it comes to anything that involves a mouse, a keyboard, anything IT. Then the CIO gets, you know, a lot of stuff stuck on his table with all kinds of requests for mouse pads.
Oh my God! What are you saying?
I guess your CIO is not here today.
I don't have a CIO. I mean, in terms of, I don't work for a bank. I have a software company that I run in Ghana, right? And I believe that these are some of the challenges that CIOs are facing. We don't have CIOs who are in tune with new trends of development. We don't have CIOs who are in tune with agile models. We don't have CIOs who are willing to move on to new database forms. They want to still use the old databases, and they are used to big budgets. So when things are not so big a budget, they don't believe in it. You know, so this is one of the dynamics, and I believe that it's about time that CIOs started repositioning themselves as business enablers, and not necessarily the people who are the go-to solution guys. They are people who are equipped within business units to understand what their real requirements are, and the CIO is supposed to have a framework to vet whether what they are looking for, there's a solution out there that can meet that kind of need. And then I believe that things will get better, but currently what I see is a lot of CIOs are just legacy.
All right.
Of ego.
We have another question here.
Just really quickly. I think we also need a bit of a paradigm shift when
Yes.
it comes to this cost to revenue.
Yes.
Because I've had these discussions many, many times, and there are two problems with it. Number one is, if I benchmark myself against somebody else, how are they putting their figures together?
Yes.
Because the way I put my figures together and the way you put your figures together might be different, yet I'm benchmarking against you. I then had a discussion with a board, which was, okay, we can save 30 million a year by closing down right now the accounting system. Let's do that. And the answer was, we can't do that. Why? Because it's going to cost 4 or 5 times more to do your accounting without a system than the way it's running right now. So if all our systems gave you that sort of ROI, then why shouldn't I be spending twice as much on IT because of that leverage that it provides? Now, what is happening with the modern companies? They are spending 80 to 90% on IT, not 4 to 5, and they are winning. So that paradigm is keeping us from innovation, I believe.
Fundile, I want to come to you perhaps, and listening to the comments that we just had from the audience, what is it that, as a technology leader, has to be done in order to break away from that paradigm? What resources, what kind of mandate would you require from the organization to play this more active role and take the organization forward? Do you have a view on that?
Thanks, Valter. Before I answer the question directly, I think it's important to acknowledge that some of the comments from the contributors are true. They are a reflection of what is out there. I mean, the CIO role is complex, and there's some unique aspects to it. Tony referred to Len earlier. Len likes to play around the CIO acronym. One of his favorites is "career is over." It's over before it begins. That's the nature of the challenge that every CIO faces out there. But to quote again from him, to say there is a need, I think, more for a paradigm shift by CIOs themselves and within business at large, rather than in terms of changing the mandate. Organizations that want to get ahead already have CIOs as not as second-tier leaders, but as key decision makers. They're not excluded. They sit at the table with everyone else from an organizational perspective. So it's not really a question of mandate, the way I see it, but it's about how the CIO, as part of the leadership team, what space does he play in, and what role does he play and how does he deliver value to the organization, or how does the organization actually improve its commercial viability, the return of investments. It is with input from the CIO. That's really what the key question is, and that it raises the issues, I think, around stakeholder management, around prioritizations, because that's really one of the serious challenges that CIOs in most big organizations faces. Everybody wants something done, they want it tomorrow, and this is the next big thing. This is the business case that's going to deliver 1,000% return on investment, and therefore that's the one thing that just can't wait to be done. And the moment it's delivered and it's not beneficial to the organization, nobody thinks about it. Everybody looks at the CIO as this guy that's just put this thing on the table.
You want to say something?
Yes, I actually do agree with the gentleman there that, organizations, it is a legacy thing. And I think a lot of CIOs, I've also been at a private fintech at a big bank, and I think to your first question, do they innovate? And I agree with Tony, they don't. The time frame from the idea arising and the decision made that we're going to implement this to implementation is too long. When a CIO decides to take on a certain technology, implements it, and there's resistance in terms of people, firstly, your people management is key. I don't think CIOs are equipped to do that in terms of resistance to new technology, enabling the user to realize that this will change your life. You're going to save time, hours. It's going to make you a superstar. I don't think CIOs are equipped with that skill set. And then I think it's a big ego thing. They don't. If I say they are very good CIOs, but there's some that, it was my decision, this was the system, I referred, the board gave me the budget, I've implemented, you will use this. If it doesn't work for the business, rather cut your losses. If it costs you X million rand, cut it today. And as a CFO, I would rather agree to that than the continual spend into perpetuity. That will cost your business more, and you will lag to your competitors in terms of innovation, because there are people that's bold enough that say, cut the system or cut this technology, you'll get a better one that you can implement faster. The systems you get today you can implement within 6 or 7 weeks, and they are run by young founders of startup companies. And I don't see why. And it comes back to your legacy issues of people that's been in a company for 20, 30 odd years, and they started in the IT division, and now they're tasked with a strategic role, which I don't think always equipped to fill.
So I'm gonna there's a question in the audience, but I'm gonna come back to you. I just want to finish this point off. So traditionally, the driver of innovation inside an organization is either the CEO or the CFO.
I'll say the CEO. The CFO's role has evolved, I think, over the past 10 years probably, and it's going to evolve into the future, because I think if you look at, if I can speak from a psycho point of view, I'm obviously a member, there's a big drive there to make CAs not CAs but business partners and enable business. Yeah. So I think it's changing. The CFO role is changing, but tradition is probably the CEO's role.
And maybe to just unpack that a little bit is that you mentioned earlier, you can't have an innovation program with someone writing the checks. And your CFO is the person that you've got to get buy-in from. Now, as a CFO of an organization, redesign the CIO. What advice would you give a CIO coming into the organization to say, you're going to take the role, you're going to hold the mandate for innovation, you're going to bring these new technologies into the core of our strategy, you're going to decide how we go forward. What is the 1 or 2 pieces of advice you'd give to this newly designed CIO without the paradigms or the existing limitations?
Okay, firstly, to that gentleman's point, surround yourself with people that are in their DNA, inherently, like Tony said, want to innovate. That is who they are. They want to look for new opportunities, new solutions. Surround yourself with a team that can support you, because ultimately, if you're the CIO, you have to make the decisions, you have to set the right direction and take the team forward. And enable the business. Your core role in that business is to enable the business. Then I'll suggest to the CIO to get the CFO's buy-in in whatever you are planning to do.
Upfront.
It's upfront. It's very difficult when a CIO approaches you with a solution to a problem that they perceive that the CFO mightn't even be aware of this in the business. And they involved right at the end, this is the system we're going for, this is the implementation partner, on paper this is what it's going to do, and it's going to cost X. It's very difficult to make that decision. Involve the CFO. I mean, you look at multiple partners, you're looking at multiple technologies, go through that, take the CFO through your due diligence process, to your visits of other companies using this technology, so that they can understand it's going to enable the business, where it's going to enable the business, and then the CFO can decide, are you going to get bang for your buck, or is it, something that because I often find people want to implement systems that they think is great on their CV. So, if I'm going to go to my next career move, I have implemented a X system, or I have adopted an X technology, and I was the first mover. It's not necessarily great for that business. That business won't get all the benefits of the spend.
All right. So earlier collaboration on the journey with one another and so on.
And continuous, continuous communication throughout the process.
All right. Great. So we're going to wrap up. We've got 2 more questions from the audience, and then we've run out of time and we'll wrap up. Behind me?
Hi. Just can I defend CIOs for a moment, please?
Are you
Guys,
feeling a bit bruised?
Yeah, I think we're a startup. I'm the founder of a startup, 15 countries, multinational banks as customers, 3 continents. And I love CIOs. I think they're visionary. I build my technology based on what they're going to do in the future, and I'm sitting here hoping to hear what these CIOs are going to do in the future, because that's where my business is going to go. We're talking about people who manage multi-billion rand accounts, thousands of employees across multiple territories. Tunji Alibi was CIO of Fidelity Bank and CIO of the Year in Ghana. I think he's brilliant. I think he's exquisite. What I'm just interested in is, do we really know who dictates the KPIs for the CIO? And can I just ask you 2 guys just to tell us, who determines what is your KPIs? And just a comment, my esteemed colleague here said, more than ever today, the CIO has the ability to make or break a business with a bad technology decision. You choose the wrong tech, you sink the company. You choose the right tech, you come out a hero. That's a lot of pressure. Who dictates what you do?
Would you like to
I'm a CIO of a bank, your bank. Okay, so from our perspective, it works like follows. First of all, innovation never is done in isolation. You cannot do innovation. So to turn around and say it's a CIO's decision is a little bit ignorant. As a matter of fact, it's being done with the whole executive team. I'm in a wonderful position where my KPIs are being dictated by the board. Okay, so I interact directly. As a matter of fact, the only strategies that comes out from SASFIN is the strategies that the CIO has written. So certain technologies, I wish I could implement an ERP system in 6 weeks. Heard of that? Can't do that. However, you can agile, my team agile completely. The second thing is you often find that the process maturity and data maturity, and I'll later be in the panel around data maturity, is often more than none a hindrance in terms of the rest of digitalization. If you really want to read a few good books, go and look at digital mastery and those kind of things. So if I may offend the role of the CIO, it is the failure of a CIO in an organization is as big a failure as that of any of the rest of the executive suite. So if you fail in technology today, it is a failure of the complete board and executive team in its totality. If one of those roles does not act in the way that they should not be in that role.
Sure.
And as a matter of fact, most of the banks today, if you look back, you'll see a CIO get fired very quickly.
All right.
If you don't.
So on that point, and before
Thanks.
we move to the last question, your KPIs, you set your KPIs.
It's a combination of the board and the business imperatives. You know, I'm deliberately trying to distinguish between the board because that's primarily from a governance perspective. If you look at King 3 specifically, for instance, accountability for IT governance and IT risk management specifically doesn't even sit with the CIO, it sits with the board. The CIO executes that based on the board mandate. But from a commercial perspective, there is business imperatives which need to ensure a contribution to overall business effectiveness.
Okay, great. And you want to add to that?
Yeah, obviously I put myself with a 20% KPI on innovation myself. It's something that I instigated. But most often it's done by a chief operating officer and business unit heads acting in harmony. And looking at an institution that's kind of grown over the years with acquisitions, for us, controlling our costs is fundamental because we realize that to give valuable products to your clients, your cost base has to come to a reasonable value. Yeah.
The shareholders.
Absolutely, yeah. Otherwise your share price goes down.
We're going to wrap up with the last question. Go for it.
Yeah, just quickly, just to kind of elaborate on the sort of actual role itself. And I do kind of agree with the defending the CIO, 10 million transactions a second, 5 geographies, 10 subsidiaries. No startup or open source is going to help you do that. But on the flip side, IT as a function in large corporations will always exist. But just drawing a little bit of a example, at the beginning of the 1900s, there was a director of electricity, and his job was huge budgets, kind of making electricity work across a whole organization, and that kind of falls away when those things become simpler. So my question on the role is it IT and CIO's responsibility to take over the new sort of innovation startup, or should that be a separate function completely, or do CIOs want to get there, or is it unfair to ask CIOs to have to do both?
Maybe I can answer that question. If you look at third and fourth platform, and who's better placed from an appreciation of the risks, the avenues for product distribution, and the governance around how to do it based on certain compliance requirements you have. You actually at the right skill level to make expert decisions. But you really need to get the buy-in of your chief financial officer. And I'll give you one discussion I had when one of our colleagues, CFO for the region, came. We expressed the technology. He looked at it. He says it's very good, technically very good, but try to do it on a shoestring budget. And I said, well, I could do better than that. We can go back to typewriters, and your IT cost has gone to nothing. The reality is you need to find out at what balancing point the technology and the cost has to be balanced. And that's a fine line you got to walk, and you keep walking that fine line and balancing the two. Because if you go over and the project fails, it's carnage. It's carnage.
So we'll wrap up on that point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
Thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much.